Everything that's written in the Bible is important, there for a reason. What the opposing adversarial forces do is they copy everything that God has done, and they create a counterfeit of it. You have two Enochs. One is the son of Cain, firstborn son, and then you have son of Jared in the Sethian line, which comes several generations later.
Jake, my brain's just breaking like everybody else's right now.
I look at what happens in Eden as the first revenge, so that the Adamites cannot reach their destiny to be raised up like angels. The giants created all of the wars and the technology of the wars with this knowledge that merged with the seven sciences, and that the violence is imposed on the world, not only on humans, but also against themselves.
Ishtar and the Nephilim and Jesus. If they were to meet with Jesus and do battle, what would happen?
The fallen angels would be gone. Whatever happens to immortal beings,
they're afraid of him.
Yeah, they're afraid of him, absolutely. And they don't want to encounter Jesus before they have to. They created the giants to not only enslave humankind, but to wipe them from the face of the earth.
Hey guys, before you get into this one, I have to tell you, this is one of my favorite episodes of all time. I feel like I say that sometimes, but every time I've said it, it's because it's changed my worldview so much just by being in the room. So I want to prep you real fast for what you're about to experience. Pound for pound, this is one of the more density. There's a lot happening in this. It's a lot of information. It comes very quickly. I'm with my new friend, Gary, who has written multiple books on this subject. And so I just want to let you know, this one might be one of those that you occasionally need to pause, because being in the room, I had to hit pause several times just to gather all of it together. We talk about pre-flood history. We talk about post-flood history. We talk about secret societies, and we talk a little bit about the armor of God and how that can prepare you and just things you need to know. So enjoy this one. Go at it slow. This man was an atheist, okay? He was like a prince of evolution. He didn't care at all. He was raised Christian, was like, that's dumb. Decided he didn't want to believe it anymore. And then just randomly one night, he started studying. And similar to when you read books like Case for Christ, you see these people who they start studying, and there was so much data he couldn't refute it. He read the Gospels and it all made sense. And there was too much data for him to be an atheist anymore. And so he gave his life to Jesus. And so we're going to go through just a bit of that story and what it looks like for you to gain understanding the godly way, and it changes your worldview. So enjoy it. I love you, and let us know what you think.
Everyone wants to get to the high places, but if you want to go high, you first have to go deep.
What's up? Welcome back to the Deep End. We're here with a genius. You're going to love this episode, and I want to give credit where it's due. Every once in a while, I'll read something, I'll see somebody's interview, I'll hear them, and you can tell almost instantly that someone has, not only have they been given a gift of understanding, but they have worked really, really hard to be able to teach it to other people. So we have Gary Wayne hailing from Canada. We flew him all the way across the continent to be here, and then we're stuck in the snow. But we're doing this interview. It's happening no matter what. Gary is the author of two best-selling books, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 1, How Secret Societies and the Descendants of Giants. What's the rest of that title?
Plan to enslave humankind.
Plan to enslave humankind. No big deal. And then The Genesis Part 2, How Understanding Prehistory and Giants Helps Define the End Time Prophecy. You call yourself a Christian contrarian, which instantly made me love you. Why is that? Why do you call yourself that?
Yeah, so you can become a contrarian in one of two ways. I do both. The way that I sort of have defined it for who I am and how I look at things and how I go about things is that I do not trust what somebody tells me or what somebody says that they saw or what they said somebody wrote. I like to verify everything for myself. So I do that in all of my research. And when I do that, it sort of puts me in kind of a natural disposition anyways of standing up against standard dogma and the status quo. So whether or not it was through the research or just my gut feeling, I end up being one of those ones that says, well, have you thought about this or have you thought about that? And so that's why I call myself a Christian contrarian, but I want people to know as well that anything that I'm going to talk about, I'm going to have research for, and I'm going to be able to back it up in ways that people aren't generally have heard before or prepared for. And when I speculate, and I tell people I speculate.
Right.
So that they know the difference.
Nice. I'm going to turn my notifications off real fast. I'm sorry about that. My team from the business doesn't understand that I'm recording a podcast, so they're texting me. Okay, tell us how you got into this. You said you're in a drunken stupor wandering around Vancouver.
Yeah. Who would think I would end up here? So
where did it begin?
Back in about 1980 or 81, I was living in Calgary at that time. And my brother and his friend came over to visit on a Friday night. And we started getting into the beers, and late into the evening, they started to talk about false prophet and Antichrist. And I was somewhat aware of Antichrist, certainly never had heard of the false prophet at that time.
Were you a Christian at this point?
No, I was full-blown brainwashed and total evolutionary, secular, science, the whole bit. I was raised a Christian, but by the time of the teens and the peer pressure and the education, had totally said, that's nonsense. And I'm going to go with the way of the world and the wisdom of the world. So at this point in time, I was thinking, well, this is kind of a weird conversation. And they keep going and going and going. And then one of them late in the evening says to me, how much courage do you have? And of course, I'm like 20 or 21 years old. And I said, well, of course, I've got a lot of courage. Bring it on, right? What is it? And they surprised me. And the question is, if you have enough courage, we would like you to read a book. And I had no idea what book they were talking about. Lots of books were running through my head, maybe even the Bible, because they're talking about Antichrist. And the book they said was The Late Great Planet Earth. You need to read this. And it was by the just recently late Hal Lindsey, who was just a astounding writer and way ahead of his time on prophecy in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And so I took the challenge. And so I read the book, and it scared the socks off of me. And I knew a couple of things at that point in time. If even only 10% of what he said was true, I need to pay attention to this. And then secondly is I needed to know whether or not he was telling the truth. Or was he speculating? Or was he distorting the information? So you can look up in a Bible fairly quickly the passages that he's quoting, and that looked to me was accurate, but I need more than that. I'm a contrarian.
Yeah.
And the only way you can do that is you have to become an expert on the Bible to understand whether or not he's being accurate or not. And I think for the most part he was. There's some things that we might, disagree on, but only the nuance is not the main sort of thrust and certainly not significant, I don't think. And so the only way to do that is I had to read the Bible. And then you find out that's a little bit larger task than one is prepared for. And the Old Testament just was killing me with the details and all the minutiae of it. And at that time, I wasn't ready for the understanding that everything that's written in the Bible is important. It's there for a reason. But I got through it, and I got to the first 4 Gospels, and by the time I finished, but by the time I was finished with the book of John, I'm going, this is not human. This individual Jesus is talking in ways and saying things that is just sort of blowing my mind. And so this can't be from a normal human. It has to be who he says he is. And so that sort of says, okay, that's given me enough to go back and finish the Bible, but now do proper research. So I thought I'm going to track every prophecy narrative in the Bible because I want to know whether or not now he's taken it out of context. So I get out my highlighters. Then I find out I don't have enough colors. So then I get more colors. Then I find out I still don't have enough colors. Then I'm going, well, okay, this is a lot bigger project than I anticipated again. And so I start getting files in. So I start to handwrite every prophecy, dividing it into specific narratives. And prophecy has many narratives that helps you with the larger chronology and the bigger picture, and putting those into files. And then I start to add some other passages that I think are important that I want and put those in the files. And this is before computers, right? Or they're just starting to come in, but nobody has, except for a few people, any personal computers, and they're probably the size of this room at that time.
Yeah.
Just kidding. They're a little smaller than
It's the
that.
80s.
Yeah. And they didn't have a lot of capacity either. So, and when you do that, you know, you run across Genesis 6 fairly quickly into the Bible, and it's talking about giants. And I'm going, whatever that is, I don't want anything to do with. That's not what I'm here for. And that's crazy stuff. And I'm going to ignore it. But to get all of the prophecy narratives tracked, I found I had to go back through the Bible many times, and because you're not sure what you're looking for, what you're identifying, when you find another prophecy track that lights up a whole bunch of other areas that need to go back. So I had to go through many times to log that. And at one point in time, I decided, well, you know, we've got these giants showing up more than in Genesis 6. They seem to be connected to fallen angels. They seem to be connected to demons. And we've got some prophetic passages that are related to them. So I better start writing some of these down. And I didn't get them all the first few times as well, because you don't realize how much information is there until you get into it. So that's what I did. And that took me up to about 1995. And
14 years.
Yeah. And then I decided, you know, I could probably write 14 or 15 prophecy books.
Yeah.
But I'm not thinking about writing the book that I did. I have my own sort of agenda because I'm a pretty stiff-necked individual, as it turns out. But I'm a contrarian, so I guess that's...
You're such a rare breed because you're a Canadian contrarian. I didn't think those
Well,
existed.
yeah. So, yeah, everybody was sort of, you know, going like this, you know, like,
Yeah.
get away
They're
from
like,
me.
what have we
What are
done?
you researching? What are you talking about? Stop it. Don't. So I decided I would try and write a short book.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a university education. I'm not a minister. I've not gone to seminary school. I have no platform.
Mm-hmm.
I've never even tried to write a book before. But I'm successful in business. But that still doesn't give you a platform to write a book. So I thought, well, can I write a book? Would it be published? Would anybody buy it? Would anybody like it? And so I thought I'd write a short book. As it turned out, somewhere along the road to the Colosseum, so to speak, things changed because I wrote a book that I thought would be fun to do and just try and write a story. And I thought, I'm going to try and connect Genesis 6 to Revelation. And so I did that fairly quickly because I had all the material
The work.
there.
Yep.
Yeah, so it was about 10 chapters. And then I thought, because before I started on this pursuit, I was a passionate history buff and a mythology buff. So I understood that what Genesis 6 is talking about is told in cultures all over the world. And I thought Christians might find it interesting to find that there's parallel accounts, whether they're counterfeited or they're polytheist parallel accounts understood through a polytheist lens versus a monotheist lens. It might give a little bit more solace to this, you know, preternatural flood event, that it's a common history in the world and it's a common legacy that we have. And so I decided that I would start putting in some Greek mythology. And then I thought, well, maybe some Sumerian mythology and then some Egyptian. And then I thought I should put as much as I can in there. And I put as much as I could, and I was sort of limited and I was kind of stuck. And I was thinking, okay, so I've put all of these references in there, and some of the Greek ones are just fantastic as a relationship to Genesis 6, like the Atlantis account. And so then I thought, well, if I'm going to put this in, I need to give some context. I need to show them what the culture was like. And to do that, you have to learn about the religions. Well, I mean, I just read the Bible. That's all I had read before. And look how long that took. And I thought, I don't want to do this, but it doesn't go away. There's like this calling, as I talk about in the preface, that just won't leave me alone. So I read the Vedas and the Upanishads and all of the subcontinent of India's literature on religions, and I read all the Gnostics accounts. I read the Popol Vuh. I read the Book of Mormon. I read everything I get my hands on, and I'm making notes to see what I can use for this context. And as I'm doing that, I realize that there's a reference to mystery schools that is part of the education process of the elite all around the world in the 4-class system that they populated in the first 2 classes with this education. And so I thought I have to learn more about mystery schools. And then I realized the secret societies take their beginnings back to the mystery schools.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, well, I don't know anything about secret societies. I've been down 2 major rabbit holes here.
I'm seeing a pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then I went down for almost a decade on researching secret societies because there's just so much information out there, and I just kept finding more and more information. And so at some point in time, I had to come up and say, okay, how does this make sense? So it went from 10 chapters to 98 chapters, and you might as well call it 100 because I have a preface and a epilogue in it, and I left out over 300 pages.
Wow.
But yeah, because
oh my goodness.
I wanted to be able to get it published. I'm a high risk. I'm unknown, no platform, and high cost.
Yeah.
So this is not a good intersection to try and sell on somebody to publish your book, let alone the story I want to tell.
Yeah. Okay. I have questions.
I think we all do.
When we do these types of episodes, we usually end up having tech issues, so I'm going to make sure we're good. Mics are good, cameras are good.
We are totally good. All around, everything looks great.
I'm sure you've experienced that before, where it's like you're about to say something incredible, and then boom, the camera shuts down.
Yeah, it's amazing how many crazy things happen.
Right? Okay, so I want to go back because when you read Cain and Abel, and then Cain's worried that other people are going to kill him, and there are no other people. Like who is he talking about? And then the next thing you know, it's like giants are like mating whales and stuff. What happens? Like what happens from Cain to the Watchers and the Nephilim? Like where's stuff at?
Can we give a little bit of context for people that don't know this part of the Bible, what you're talking about?
Sure. From me or from Gary?
From you.
Yeah, you have Cain and Abel, who are the sons of Adam and Eve, and Cain kills Abel, and then God judges Cain, and Cain is worried that if God doesn't protect him, then other people will kill him. But at this point in the story, we only know about Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel, so we don't know who he's talking about. So God has to basically mark him with something to protect him, and then it seems like the story kind of lurches forward, and all of a sudden there's evil everywhere, and there's just a bunch of giants.
Well, and why Cain killed Abel? Can you speak to that real fast?
Cain killed Abel because he's a dumbass. You may be able to add more content to that, but for my purposes, Cain's an idiot. He got jealous and he killed his brother.
Right. Yeah.
Is there more to it than that? Is he just?
There's always more to the story.
Okay, take us.
More to the story.
He wants to know why Cain would kill someone. I want to know what happened.
No, it's just the principle that you've talked about. Not everybody's read that part of the Bible, and so we don't know why. If we don't know why Cain killed Abel, we don't understand why God wouldn't like Cain very much and wouldn't want to protect him.
Just go to ChatGPT and ask why Cain killed Abel.
Great, done. All right.
So very interesting information and questions are provided, or questions are raised as you read Genesis 1, Genesis 2, all the way through to Genesis 6. And as a contrarian, I don't like things that I don't understand or might be obscure. And so when I look at the story of Cain and Abel, and all of a sudden the offering is not accepted by God, I want to know why. I want to know why, when he's ostracized, he has to have a mark, because as the standard Christian dogma is, there's nobody else in the world.
Right.
And there won't be anybody else in the world till after Seth is born. And Seth is born when Adam is 130 years old, according to Genesis 5. And then sometime later, and we're not told how long later, more daughters and sons are born. So after he's ostracized and he has a mark for protection from we don't know who, he finds a wife in Nod, east of Eden. That shouldn't be there. And I'll come back to that in just a second. And then he builds a city for people who ought to be there. And you built cities in prehistory, both before and after the flood, typically with walls. That's why you built the cities, and then, agrarian societies and settlements around for protection. Protection from who? So all of these questions are racing through my mind as I'm trying to understand the early part of Genesis. And so it starts with either Cain has already rebelled and turned before the first offerings, and we understand, or it's because of the offerings. I think it's both. And when I look at this as being the first offerings of their adult as the first event, adulthood in the Bible comes between 20 and 40 years old. And it's a series of processes. So there's an age of like 25 for priesthood, for example, as you move through that adult period. So this is the first offerings of the first offspring after Adam and Eve were ostracized from the Garden of Eden. And then you have Cain's offering rejected, and we're not given any context. We are, but we don't understand we are. It will come later in the Bible. And because of that rejection, he becomes so jealous of Abel, he murders him. Why? Probably because of the covenants and the inheritance rights that are going to come down through, after this incident, through Seth, and then to Noah, and then to Abraham. It's a process for the creation of the Adamites to be a resolution to the angelic rebellion, to the greater picture. But I want to stay a little bit more focused on the question that you answered, because it's such an important creation of how Adam and Eve are created, and then the story with Cain and Abel. So understanding that this is a direct predecessor of what's going to ultimately become the Holy Covenant, we get the covenant laws and requisites and feasts and offerings in the Holy Covenant with Israel. And with the first fruit, with the harvest, there's a first fruit offering that's part of it. And those are also partially prophetic as well. They're there to keep to have Israel reminded of what their destiny is. And the first fruits are the first of what is ripe with vegetables, or the firstborn with the animals. And so we're told clearly that Abel offers the first fruits, but it doesn't show Cain offering the first fruits, that he kept those for himself. And with that, he becomes rejected. And with that, he's going to lose what we would see come down in its fulfillment as part of the resolution to the angelic rebellion, the birthright blessings, the birthright inheritance, and the Messianic promise. Those are significant things that are at play that we're going to get explained a little bit more about as the Bible unfolds. So there's only two, and he's lost. And so he's going to try and eliminate his rival and becomes rejected. But it doesn't answer who he is afraid of. And it doesn't answer why would he even be afraid of future generations? Like, would they even know who he is? The earth is a large place. When would they ever find him?
Right.
And would they recognize him? But clearly there's a threat. So who's this threat? So as a contrarian, I want to know where the people came from that he intermarries with, because they're not supposed to be there. And even if you look at the Eden account, we don't get a timeline in there, but it seems to be not very long. So even if you apply 40 years to that, and even if you took the adulthood to 40 years with Adam and Cain, you're only at 80, and it's 130 years before Seth is born. So you still have a disparity there, and I don't believe the Bible is in contradiction. I just don't believe that, and I've never found that. I find we put preconceived conclusions on the Bible,
Assumptions.
and then the assumptions, and then we try and wedge everything else in, and anything we can't, we ignore. And that's not a process that sits well with a contrarian. So the only way I can reconcile that is that there's two different creations, one in day 6, one in Genesis 2. And that if you look at the details in Genesis 2 to Genesis 1, they're in conflict. They don't mix up. And again, for me, the Bible should not be in contradiction. And so you have things like you can eat anything you want from every tree, and you're to multiply and spread it around the earth in Genesis 1, but you're not allowed to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and you're not spreading around the earth. You're placed in Eden. And by the way, they're created male and female in multiple and in great numbers and told to populate, where there's only Adam. And at some point in time, Eve is created later, and he's created differently than what happens in Genesis 1. And you have Jehovah of the Elohim being introduced versus just Elohim, although Jehovah is there with the Hebrew word Amar when God speaks, the word of God, the cognate term for Jehovah of the Elohim. Word of God is the logos of the theos in Greek, so it's the cognate term in a different language. And he's introduced in Genesis 2:4 with the creation of Adam, Lord God, as it's translated. And so he breathes his spirit into Adam for a special commission.
So are there two Adams, or is it just how does that reconcile?
Yeah, well, you have male and female created at the same time in Genesis 1. So you also have the word man, which is Adam as well, that's used. It's a different Adam in the Hebrew concordance. But Adam in Genesis 2 is a derivative of the Adam that's listed sort of generically in Genesis 1. So the same species, perhaps a different race, and perhaps there's 3 or 4 races, and Adam will be one of the 4 races, but he's created for a specific purpose. And so you have all of these, and there's more. I have documents. One of the most popular documents I have asked of me, if people get a hold of me through the website, be patient, I will get back to you. And I detail all of the differences, and I take everything back to the Hebrew, and you can see the differences there. And it's not day 8. There's no day 8. And there's another interesting thing that crops up in this is that sometime after day 7, you have this creation with the genealogies or the Toledoth of Adam for a specific reason, which isn't part of Genesis 1. And some people will say, well, it's additional information. I agree with that MO that the Bible has, but it's never in contradiction. It adds more information, but directionally, it's perfectly consistent. This is not. And so I also look at 2 Peter 3 as a very revealing passage on this, is that, and it raises another interesting thing that happened in Eden as well, where a day is like 1,000 years. So if one day is 1,000 years, and the people in day 6 are created at the end of day 6, according to the narrative, and you have the beasts of the field that are created before, they could have been created up to 1,000 years before. So roll that forward to Genesis 3 with the serpent, the Nahash serpent, which is rooted in another Hebrew word, Nahash, meaning a sorcerer, necromancer, wizard, priest, words like that from polytheism, is going to be the one that deceives Eve and is there previous to Eve. And so by the nature of being a beast of the field, as the serpent is talked about in Genesis 3:1 and the order of creation in day 6. So they could have been there up to 1,000 years before, even longer if there's another gap after day 7, of which we don't know how long it would be, that you have a scenario where if they are priests of polytheism, they may be the religion of the people that Adam is going to run into in Nod. And now all of a sudden,
Adam or Cain?
I'm sorry, Cain.
Cain.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Cain, when he is ostracized and moves off to Nod. So all of a sudden now, all the answers to the questions I have are there, but I can't answer those questions without dealing with the details. And the only way I can line up the contradictions, even the creation order is different. So you could even speculate there was some sort of disaster after day 7, but before the Adam account, that's almost another restart. And I would take people back to Ecclesiastes 1 when we're trying to understand prehistory. In Ecclesiastes 1, it talks about nothing is new under the sun. What was will be again. And then as you read on in that, it says, the understanding of this only brings grief and sorrow. And this is very important as we look back from where we are today. If nothing is new under the sun, what was going on back there? And you start to ask more questions and you go a little bit deeper. So I think where the people of Nod come from are the people of day 6. And that's where the 4 races come from.
Got it. Okay. I have a question about that. I want to make a quick statement for people watching if I can. If you're a new Christian or if like you're just kind of like brand new, because sometimes we'll go into topics that are super deep like this and people are like, all you have to do is just like believe in Jesus. And it's like, yes, I get it. None of this should change your viewpoint of the main things, right? Like Jesus is at the top of the pole, the totem pole. He's coming back. You can like, you're married. You love your wife. Do you know where your wife is like right now? Like, can you confidently say you know exactly where she's at and what she's doing?
Hopefully,
but maybe not. She might be getting groceries. She might be at home.
Exactly.
But you know, there's a hierarchy here of like, the pursuit of details does not overrule the main thing. And so I don't want anybody to get lost in this. It shouldn't change like Jesus is king. And do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, exactly. This should increase your faith.
Exactly.
And that you are now able to answer questions that the deceivers and those trying to seed gap between yourself and God and create wedge issues within Christianity to eat away at your faith, you'll be able to answer these questions.
Yes.
And so I think that we need to understand if it is the word of God, it's going to be in perfection.
Yep.
And that the answers are there for us, but we have to ask the right questions and then believe what we're reading.
100%.
And so this just sort of opens up a better understanding of the antediluvian world. And for people not familiar with the term, this big old word for before the flood, I might say post-diluvian, that's also after the flood. And we start to get a context as to what's going on in this world where you have one individual that's selected to be a deliverer, which is a common MO in the Bible. So you have Noah who's going to be selected. You have Abraham who's going to be selected.
Moses.
You have Moses that's going to be selected. And the true chosen one will come through that genealogy manifesting in flesh as being the word of God.
Yeah. So you keep mentioning 4 races. I don't know what those are.
Well, we would understand them in just sort of a color fashion, maybe not as politically correct as what people would understand.
Got it. So it's literal race. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, a little race of humans.
Got it.
As opposed to a different species. And it answers the question to a certain degree as to how the races show up again after the flood. Because you haven't accounted for extra races before the flood. Mm-hmm. How do they show up after the flood? Mm-hmm. And we were told there's only 8 on the ark, but the wives are unnamed. So the wives likely represent the 4 races and why they show up after the flood. And even Cush is associated with the black race immediately after the flood and with Africa. So it starts to make some sense that those genes would come with the wives.
Got it. Well, I've never thought about that before.
Neither of that explains.
Have
a
you
lot,
been
though.
thinking about that for a while, Jake?
I've been just dwelling on it every morning at
Jeez.
6 a.m.
Well, it answers another question. Why is Eve the mother of all living if we have all of these other races that show up after the flood, but the lineage we get is from probably one of those races?
Yeah. Okay. So Cain is afraid of potentially these polytheistic civilizations that exist elsewhere. And one of the things I found fascinating, and it did take me a while to understand that you were not calling Enoch evil in your book. I was like, what's this man got against Enoch? Enoch was a prophet. Maybe Gary doesn't know what he's talking about. But then I was like, you're talking about two Enochs. So there are two different Enochs. One is from Cain, one is from Seth. Can you unpack that?
Yeah, every detail in the Bible is important for us to understand. And so we have two genealogies that are shown in the book of Genesis. One is the genealogy of Adam that is going to be showing starting at the end of Genesis 4, but then completed in Genesis 5. But Cain is shown to us in Genesis 4 and his genealogy. And that you have names that are phonetically similar, but some of the names in each of those genealogies of those original patriarchs, some of them are identical. So you have two Enochs. One is the son of Cain, firstborn son, and an important figure. And then you have son of Jared in the Sethian line, which comes several generations later. You also have two Lamechs. One produces Tubal Cain.
It's literally a counterfeit. You have one, the ecclesiastic one, and then you have a copy.
Yeah. And again, that's not an unusual thing, but it's important for Christians to understand that Cain is going to turn and worship the pantheon of gods, the fallen angels, and is going to try and lead the whole world away from God. And so you're going to have a counterfeit religion being introduced that Cain is going to be responsible for. And the knowledge that Cain learns from Adam while Adam is in Eden, he's got to run this incredible agrarian operation from the Nile to the Euphrates, from Mount Hermon to the Sea of Aqaba, the Red Sea, and the Indian Ocean that's on the south. And if you look at the Hebrew of the words, because the English isn't giving you the full context, he is growing orchards. He is growing crops of all sorts. He is raising domesticated animals of all different kinds. And there's only one of them. And then at some point in time, Eve is created to help him out. So he's going to have knowledge to be able to do this. Mm-hmm. And he's going to pass this knowledge of the agrarian understanding on to Cain, who is going to go to Nod to meet with people who aren't living in a city. These are hunters and gatherers as we kind of look at the language in Genesis 1. And he's going to introduce the agrarian society.
He's going to teach them.
He's going to teach them. And that has a terrific coinciding with history of the start of the agrarian society in writing. And in Sumeria, because he's going east of Eden, which is towards to the other side of the Euphrates River. And so everything starts to make some perfect sense when we start to understand these details, and it's a counterfeit religion. And what the opposing adversarial forces do is they copy everything that God has done, and they create a counterfeit of it. And so we'll even have that rolling forward into the end time with an Antichrist figure, which is the opposite or a counterfeiting of the true Messiah. Yeah. And everything that happens through the polytheist forces is to counterfeit that and to lead people away from God with that deception.
At what point do the Watchers come on the scene?
Well, Watchers are on the scene from the beginning.
Oh, okay. Are they sleeping with women from the beginning, or
no,
do they? Okay,
not that we're aware of. And who knows what happened before maybe this gap that's between day 7 and Eden. Or as when people get into the Hebrew of the language in Genesis 1, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but that word was void and formless is the Hebrew word haya, which can be translated as became. And there's a whole bunch of other information that comes with that.
Yeah.
And if that was a destruction, then you have a renewal of the earth. And if you had to do that, you would have to reseparate the waters from the below to the waters of the above, as described, to create the heaven, and underneath for where life to be is going to be created in Genesis 1. So when we look at the Watchers, when did they rebel? We don't know, but we know that Satan has rebelled by the time of working with, one deduces, with the serpent Nahash to deceive Eve, and that if there was 1,000 years before humans in day 6, there's at least 1,000 years where these individual beings and were worshiping the fallen angels. So you can make a case through connecting dots and a bit of speculation that this religion may have even been in place before Cain comes along, right?
Somewhere else.
Yeah. Yes. And so the fallen angels, I look at what happens in Eden as the first revenge. So that the Adamites cannot reach their destiny to be raised up like angels, to judge angels for the crimes that they've committed against us, and to be the inheritors of eternity. And so they're trying to prevent that. So by Genesis 6 is when we get the understanding of Watchers, as they're talked about in polytheist accounts. But we do get Watchers in the Bible, listed in Daniel 4 times in the KJV. And Watchers that's the Hebrew word ayir, which means to watch, to be a watcher angel, and comes from the Hebrew word which means to be awake. So you look at the book of Enoch, it puts 4 groups of watchers around the throne of God. So you have the archangels, you have the seraphim, you have the cherubim, and then you have the ophanim, which comes from those wheel angels in Ezekiel 1, 3, and 10, where not the wheel, which is the Hebrew word gagel, but the cherubim-like angels, because they have a face of a cherubim as well, so something slightly distinct. That's the Hebrew word ophan, put on the I am male plural, as in seraphim. You get the ophanim that the book of Enoch talks about. So these watchers are, in the book of Enoch, talked about as the ones who produced the giants with human females. And in Genesis 6, we get the sons of God, which are doing the same thing. And the sons of God are noted as angels in Job 1:6, Job 2:8, and the cruncher is in Job 38, 4 through 7, where at the beginning of creation, before humans are created, the sons of God and the morning star order are dancing and celebrating for joy. And in Psalms 104 as well, which is kind of an interesting parallel for Genesis 1, particularly with when God sends his spirit, you have a renewal of the earth. Angels are created in Psalms 104 as part of the additional details to Genesis 1. And so these are not humans. These are understood in the Old Testament as sons of God are the watchers, and the watchers in Daniel 4 come from the throne of God in charge of the governance of the world. And the seraphim are in charge of the religious aspect and the kingships, or the government, as part of their authority. And these are serpent-faced, seraphim, 6-winged dragon angels that work before the altar of God and actually work as ministers there. They pull a stone out in Isaiah 6 to put on Isaiah's lips to take the sin away in preparation for the vision that he's about to receive. So when we look at these watchers, it has a lot of context for the sons of God, and are the same ones, because sons of God are, just as the book of Enoch uses, using a a term for the watchers as a whole.
So the sons of God are not Elohim. The sons of God are watchers.
Well, you can use it both ways. So the understanding of Elohim is God, an angel, and the God Most High.
Okay.
So depending on how it's used. So in the uppercase, Elohim would be a singular application
The God Most High.
of the God Most High. We would know as El Elyon, right?
Yeah.
And so if it's in the small case, El is the singular one for a God or a angel, and Elohim in the lower case would be multiple angels or multiple gods.
Got it. So when you look at like the Babylonian pantheon or even the Hindu religion, it's Elohim, multiple gods, which could be multiple fallen angels.
Yes.
That are kind of grouped together similarly in a similar function, or am I reading too much into that?
No, you're bang on that. So if we look at both before and after the flood, you have two different pantheon of gods. You have parent gods that reigned before the flood, and then you have offspring gods after the flood. So for people not familiar with that term, let's use the Greek pantheon. So you would have Kronos and Gaius as being the male and female of the parent gods before the flood. In all pantheons around the world, the offspring gods overthrow the parent gods. And so in this case, Zeus is the offspring god. And then he has a different pantheon that he rules from. So you can't kill gods because they're immortal by definition, but you can send them to the pit prison.
Hades?
Hades or Sheol, yes.
Okay.
Otherworld, Arcatha, known by 1,000 different terms all around the world, but all talking about the same place. So you have different vernacular names for the various gods in the pantheon around the world, but they're all the same. So if we roll forward to post-Diluvian pantheons that people might be familiar with, I'll just use the male god. Zeus is the same as Osiris, the same as Baal in the flood. In the Bible.
Yeah.
And El is the parent god before the flood.
Got it.
Right? And so El and Ashtaroth were the two famous ones creating giants before the flood, but it's Baal and Anat after the flood who move up and take over for that council of the gods that the Ugaritic text talks about, or the Baalim, as they're talked about in the Bible, to rule over the 70 nations of the world, both before and after the flood. And so when we look at this notion of fallen angels being gods, these are fallen angels. And that term comes from, I think, a couple of different ways, all ending up meaning the same sort of thing. So in Isaiah 14, where you have Satan, Hail El, Ben Shakar, Hail El, son of the morning, not Lucifer, should be Hail El. That's an Italian word inserted into the English language for a Hebrew word, Hail El. And typically angels have a name ending in EL, like Michael or Gabriel. Or
It's just funny that it's Hail
yeah, it's not a coincidence.
El.
Yeah, God
But
of
he's
hell.
not El. He's even, there's so many ways. All right, hold on.
And part of the morning star order is one of his attributes. But I'll just sort of kind of get back on.
Okay, don't take a drink of water till he finishes. Okay, go. Then we're gonna have to take a break so people can like not die.
Yeah.
We'll keep going. I'm about max, so you let my brain settle. But
Okay,
this is amazing.
So in this passage in Isaiah 14, that's when Satan falls from heaven, just as in Luke 10:18, Jesus verifies, testifies he saw Satan fall from lightning from heaven.
Yeah.
That word fall or fell is the Hebrew word nephal. It's the source word for Nephilim. So it carries some of the meaning with it. Nephilim meaning giant, tribe of giant, bully, or tyrant, all reflecting descriptions of the giants, not different meanings. And you put the I am male plural on Nephal, you get the Nephilim, which are the Nephilim of the Shemaim, or the heavenly ones. And now we understand, if we have that understanding, we have the same polytheist religion around the world with the same rituals and the same hierarchy, just with different vernacular and local rituals.
Yikes.
Jake?
My brain's just breaking like everybody else's right now. I've been living a lie, essentially. I have to restart.
Yeah, let's just give everyone like 10 seconds. I'm changing where I want to go based on this. Thank you for being a genius, by the way.
I don't even know where to start. Thank God you two are here. And Taylor, you understand more of what he's saying than I do.
No, not really. Okay, got it.
Can I ask something based off? It's going to bring us into practical, if that's okay.
Yeah, hold on. Wait, before we go practical, because that's boring.
I know.
One more.
I know.
Is Hellel, Satan, is he at the top of this hierarchy, the
Yes.
rank and file?
Yeah, he would sit above the council of the gods that Psalms 82 talks about. These are the sons. These are the sons of the Most High. So sons of El Elyon, sons of God, is essentially the same term. And the mighty there, the council of the mighty is the Hebrew word El. So El can be used for mighty as well as part of its meaning, but mighty in this case is referring to those sons of God. And so you have that cognate term in the council of the gods that's being used in Genesis 6 as well. And for other connections, just to put it on the record for people, is that in the Old Testament, angels are referred to as angels, number one, stars, number two, is an allegory, as in the host of heaven and in the skies. And they can be called sons of God. And they can also be called the host, which is the host of heaven. Host is the Hebrew word saba, meaning an army of angels, which has rank and order. So these terms are used interchangeably throughout the Old Testament. So host and stars, angels, and the host, and morning stars and sons of God. There's just a few examples of how they're used, but they're used over and over so that we understand who these beings are in the Old Testament.
Got it. Okay. I know where I want to go from here, but you can take us practical
you
first.
No, you go. You go.
Okay. So here's where we're at so far. Cain is rejected. Therefore, Cain chooses to worship this pantheon, polytheistic type of society. Out of the lineage of Cain comes Enoch the evil. Enoch the evil, as he created writing, correct? Like he was the one that kind of discovered writing.
Yeah, so Adam is going to teach all of his knowledge to Enoch. And he is going to create what is known in Gnosticism and the secret societies as the 7 sacred sciences. And Enoch the evil splits those into what we would know as the 7 sciences today. Arts and sciences are the same term in the ancient world. So grammar, for example, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, those types of things that are used today that have the same agenda to lead people away from God, to not give God credit for anything, to slander God, and to honor their pantheon of the gods, which is what we see on university campuses even to this day, with secret societies like Alpha House, Beta House. On the pseudo blue blood Ivy League, you would have the Skull and Bones. As you move up into sort of the bloodlines in terms of the aspect of those of that education and the secret societies. So he creates these disciplines, and then he creates mysticism before the flood that I call Enochian mysticism. And he creates the sun and bull worshiping cult of mysticism. And this becomes the worldwide religion, or you could also argue from what we were talking about before that part of this religious aspect was already there, and it becomes sort of a merged sort of a religion that becomes the most standardized religion in the world. And so This is the knowledge that has to be protected as it's being developed from the Sethites. Not that Seth doesn't have knowledge, but he's going to only use knowledge for the use of good, not for evil. And that this knowledge is going to then merge with knowledge that is provided in polytheist accounts all around the world, the knowledge from the gods for civilization. The knowledge is the knowledge in the book of Enoch. That's the illicit knowledge that is going to be provided, that's going to merge with the seven sciences, that will then merge with the creation of the giants and create this Nephilim hegemony, a Nephilim world order, so to speak, before the flood, that's going to be using the organizational structure of that government, of the four-class system that they're going to introduce, and Enochian mysticism to control the world. And they're going to develop this knowledge to a point where you have to bring about the flood. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself in terms, but just setting the picture of what's going on before the flood. And there's multiple civilizations likely. Biblically, we look at it as a Sumerian society, antediluvian Sumerian, because it's just a knot. But when we look at polytheist accounts, they have 4 civilizations, 7 civilizations, 9 civilizations, maybe even more. Biblically, we're not told about those multiple civilizations, but I think we should be open that there was more than just the one civilization, because Cain could have migrated anywhere in the world, and he still would have needed that mark
For protection.
for protection.
I want to jump forward for just a quick second, but I want us to not get lost in it, because I want to jump forward and then jump backwards to pre-flood, just so people understand the validity and importance of this. There's data embedded into history, and you've connected everything together. Based on what you see from the data in history, is it your belief that these Nephilim are still operating today and attempting to just recreate what they had before?
Yeah, we need to keep in mind that nothing is new under the sun. And as we move into the last days, we need to understand that it will be like the days of Noah, both before and after the flood. Noah lived 600 years before the flood, 350 years after the flood. So we can expect there was a regeneration of what happened after the flood, before the flood, shortly after the flood, and has been trying to represent itself all the way through the post-Diluvian epoch, and will come to a full resolution in the last fig tree generation in the last 7 years as well. So yes, the simple answer is yes on that. And if we're at a technology level that we are today, and it's still progressing, and we're not in the last 7 years, I think we might be in the fig tree generation, still in the sorrows if we are, but I think we might be in the fig tree generation.
What does that mean?
Well, Jesus set down a chronological order of events in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 17, and 21. And after he gives his chronological order of events, that starts with the sorrows, the birth pangs, which is an allegory to understand that generation, plus he then gives you 2 more allegories to understand the generation with, after the sequence of events, with the fig tree generation. And all the events that he said will be fulfilled in that generation. Heaven and earth will pass away, but his words won't pass away. And then we're told it's going to be like the days of Noah. So those are the 3 overarching signs for the sequence of events that will happen in the end time. And so if we're just catching up to the antediluvian technology, that they had an ability that's even more than what we have, that we're being, I think, to a certain degree helped with, it starts to explain things. So when we roll now back to before the flood and the details, then understand that the creation of the giants is in the preamble to the flood story. It's partly the context for it. And Noah is introduced at the end of Genesis 5. Giants created Genesis 6, 1 through 4. And Noah's reintroduced in his sons again and his commission after that creation. And then you get the flood that's going to come on, and it's because the whole earth is corrupted and it's violence. So two things, two very, very important things to understand for understanding the flood and before the flood and what's going to happen in the end time. First thing is the violence. And the violence comes from the giants. And the giants created all of the wars and the technology of the wars with this knowledge that merged with the seven sciences, and that the violence is imposed on the world, not only on humans, but also against themselves as they produce rivals. So this knowledge in the book of Enoch, again, not scripture, but some context to keep in mind, this is the knowledge of Azazel, who provides most of the knowledge, but in this aspect, he is providing the knowledge of the arts of war, the craft of war. So that includes not only how to make weapons, but technological weapons. That includes how to use them. It includes the strategy, it includes the martial arts, it includes everything. So now if they have angelic technology, they have planet destruction capability. Particularly if you understand that if the angelic war may have happened before Genesis 1-2.
That destroyed it, that made it void and
that
had to be regenerated.
Yeah, and that the earth that was in the water, that's out of the water, that's talked about in 2 Peter 3, that was destroyed by fire and perished, and in the flood, the whole earth didn't perish. But if you had a war of angelic technology that destroyed the earth down to its foundations, then you would have to renew the earth, as Psalms 104 says, when God sends his Spirit, which you have the Holy Spirit over the chaos in Genesis 1-2, where you could translate that as the world was void and formless. And those two words, tuho and buhu, basically reflect destruction in terms of applying that destruction, and that God doesn't create anything in vain in Isaiah 45, which is tuhu as well, meaning the same thing. He creates everything to be lived with, that the earth becomes destroyed, that this is the angelic technology that was used in the rebellion to destroy that, and now you have a regeneration or a renewal of the earth, as Psalms 104 talks about. And so nothing is new under the sun. Destruction by fire. And now possibly and likely, my speculation, likely you have the technology there before the flood to destroy the world by fire. Thus comes the flood.
Hey, almost because God's like saying, like, you're not going to do this again.
Yeah, you're not going to do this again, because God has written every name from before creation in the book of life. And until those names are presented when there's to be presented, to be given a chance to leave that name in the book of life or have it blotted out, God's going to intercede. And he's going to intercede more than once throughout our history to ensure that that happens. And so that's the first part of what happens. And also for people who are concerned about polytheists saying God's an evil God because he brings the flood. He is either permitting or bringing the flood so that all the names can have the gift of life that were written in the book of life and have an opportunity to be raised up to be like angels. So there's a good reason for it. And then secondly on that, from a polytheist account, it's the fallen angels who bring the flood.
Yeah, they're the ones messing it all up anyways.
Yeah, because giants are too evil and warring against the gods, and humans are too noisy, according to polytheist accounts. So typically what happens in biblical MO is God permits them to do it, right?
Yeah.
So just as he permits Satan to continually test the world.
I have a question. You mentioned earlier, probably 5 minutes ago, you mentioned the technology that we have now is not as advanced as what they had before the flood. And then you said something so sneaky. You said, we're being helped now. Yeah. What did you mean by that?
Well, you have to look at the understanding of the development of our technology today is happening at an inexplicable rate, and knowledge that is changing everything, and it's happening very, very quickly. This is the same scenario that happened before the flood, especially if you overlay the context of the polytheist accounts with God's providing knowledge, and if you overlay it with Enoch, where the same thing happens. So if it's going to be like the days of Noah, we're just catching up to that knowledge. And they had, in polytheist accounts, the ability to do DNA manipulation as well.
Which we just, out in the East, they just came, like that book was written about CRISPR technology. Have you seen any of that?
Yes, I have. And again, all sorts of knowledge and interdimensional knowledge are coming our way. Quantum computing is becoming merged with AI, which is going to be merged with all of the other technologies to get us to this technology that they want us to get to. And so when we look at the DNA manipulation in prehistory, we'll look at Chimera, for example, as sort of the name that they use for DNA experiments today. Chimera was a creature that had multiple animal parts to it and was created by the gods. So there's a DNA aspect to that, and there is the angelic sexual act that goes with it. And there has to be that sexual act to reproduce by taking a physical form, which have the ability to do, as accounted for in Hebrews 13, to be nice to strangers, lest we come across an angel unaware, and the accounts in Genesis 18 and 19, where angels take human forms, in the Sodom and Abraham narratives there, and other accounts through the Bible. I won't go through them all. So understand they can take a physical form, and a physical form of choice. And that's the soul and the body for their angelic spirit. Jude 1:6 uses the word habitation, where those fallen angels left their habitation. That's the Greek word oikaterion, which means a dwelling place for the spirit. So you have a dwelling place for the spirit in the physical world, which is the soul and the body, and the spirit comes from heaven. And when we die, as humans, our spirits go back to heaven. Counterfeit spirits don't. And
so they're stuck here.
Yeah, so this is the Xerox spirit that's passed on through the DNA that the angels have when they reproduce to make the giants with human females.
Which is, okay, that's why the Nephilim are still here.
Yes. Now, they're called demigods, which is the ancient term for the offspring of a god and a human female, or a goddess and a human male in polytheism. And that denotes 50-50. But what's interesting is in the Sumerian accounts, you have, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, for example, you have Enkidu and Gilgamesh, which are post-Diluvian giants, 6th generation after the flood, son of King Lugalbanda of Uruk, and the mother goddess, bull goddess Nin, produces with Lugalbanda to create Gilgamesh. He is 2/3 god, 1/3 human. So is Enkidu, who's created to offset the evil of Gilgamesh. And all of those on the ark within the Epic of Gilgamesh story, with Upmatishan and all of his family, they are 2/3 god and 1/3 human. So no longer 50-50. Something else is at play there. Maybe it's an allegory for saying that the giants were more godlike in the beginning than humans. Or there's an ability to move those fractions around. So can they create and then also do DNA manipulation to create beings like King Hababa in the Epic of Gilgamesh, that Enkidu and Gilgamesh are going to go to Mount Hermon to kill it, where the cedar forest is? Look at that description if somebody gets a chance, and you're going to see all sorts of parts of animals on that particular giant created by the gods. So now, this Chimera, understanding
Chimera
suggests
is a thing, right? Not a technology, but you think it
was a being.
A being.
Being. But it's the term that's used today for DNA manipulation.
Oh, wow.
Because they name everything after their gods and their history. It's just part of the MO. When we understand that, we can see the world we live in more clearly. So yes, we're just catching up to that technology. And that technology was so strong and this is where I get it back biblically to give you some teeth for what I'm talking about, is that the whole earth was corrupted in the time of Noah. All flesh was corrupted. That's the Hebrew word shakath. And it's an interesting word. It can mean destroy. It can mean destroy, but it can also mean to pervert, to ruin, to decay, words like that. And so all, in that application, all flesh was corrupted, perverted. That means the whole earth was all corrupted in the same way with the same word there that's used in Hebrew. That means the plant genomes were all corrupted. That means all the flesh of the animals were corrupted for the most part. Now we understand why God calls a representative of each species to the ark, because he knows which ones are not corrupted.
Oh, wow.
And it's an extreme minority. It's an extreme minority.
Yes, and it's one that can repopulate the whole species.
Oh, wow. What a move.
Yeah. So when people like to use the unicorn story, which they have no idea what a unicorn really was, which was not this cute little cuddly thing, but it's a chimera animal.
Oh, great.
That the giants rode into battle on in the occult mythology with a single horn. And as a chimera, it would not be called to the ark.
What about dinosaurs?
Depending on when dinosaurs were actually on the earth. If you look at it, I'm good either in this gap before the renewal of the earth or sometime before the flood, maybe both, because nothing is new under the sun. What was will be again.
That's the first thing. This is the first time I've ever heard an explanation for why like dinosaurs weren't on the ark. Is if they were in the gap before the renewal, then when God renewed the earth, he could have just not renewed them.
Yeah.
Also,
and again, who created the dinosaurs? Maybe it was
Chimera.
fallen angels that were creating. Yeah. So if we look at the seraphim again, we're talking about serpent-faced, dragon-faced
dinosaurs.
Yeah, these are dragon angels, just as we see serpentine imagery as most of the imagery in the pantheons, where let's say Quetzalcoatl is a plumed or feathered serpent, or Osiris is an Osiris or other mother goddesses, were what they call Uraeus gods, which were flying serpent angels, just as Zeus was originally Kronos, just as all of the angels, fallen angels in the Sumerian pantheon were mostly serpentine. They populated most of the ruling council. And so if they were going to have creatures in the physical world, their preference would be, my speculation, is to have similar kinds of beings. So what types of beings are similar to that? Dinosaurs are now looked at as having feathers, just as these were, feathered dragon angels, and that these are serpentine reptilian beings. And they're giant in nature. The MO is very, very similar, just as the Nahash is a serpentine being that is deceiving Eve. If we look at the patterns, we can see the consistency.
Yeah. What's funny, I just saw a TikTok, and it was Jurassic Park, but if it was like an actual representation of what they actually looked like, you got like velociraptors with feathers on them.
Yeah.
And they like don't look as scary because they have feathers. I have a problem with you, Gary. I want to just come clean on this. I'm going to confess. Before we started this interview, I thought I was intelligent. If the bar for writing,
I assure you, you're intelligent.
If the bar for writing a book is you, I'm never going to be able to write another book. So thank you for taking a dream away from me. So now I'm like, I am so dumb. I have to go get so much smarter to write a next book because Gary didn't write a book till he knew everything.
34 years of this stuff.
This is insane.
My goodness.
Okay. Anything? You want me to keep going, or you want to? ground us for a second.
I don't even know how to ground us at the moment. I think it might take till we get to like some of the future, more recent topics.
I have a hypothetical question for you, and then I want to connect Freemasonry, the Illuminati, back to the Enoch the Evil.
Yep.
Hypothetically, because you have the ability to tell stories because you know all the details. What's the general consensus in terms of attitude and fear around these Ishtar and the Nephilim and Jesus? Like if they were to like meet with Jesus and like do battle, what would happen?
Well, the fallen angels would be gone. Whatever happens to immortal beings,
they're afraid of him.
Yeah, they're afraid of him, absolutely. And they don't want to encounter Jesus before they have to. And so one of the reasons for creating the spurious offspring, used in the ancient sense, is to do what the angels, fallen angels, are fearful to do. Oh. They do not want to get blood on their hands.
Oh,
so they use their spurious offspring and the followers of them to slander God, because they won't.
They don't want to be caught doing it.
No, they know the power of the God Most High, and they created
cowards,
smart cowards.
Yes,
yeah.
very
cowards
smart
nonetheless, but smart cowards. They created the giants to not only enslave humankind, but to wipe them from the face of the earth, which has been a common MO as that rolls forward after the flood with Israel, so that humankind will not reach their destiny. And so they get very close before the flood. Thus, the flood comes to stop that from happening.
Yeah.
But then it starts again after the flood.
Got it. Okay. Can you connect Enoch the Evil from the offspring of Cain, the seven sciences, through the mystery schools to Freemasonry, Skull of Bones, Illuminati, like all of these New Age, I would imagine, is a derivative of some of these seven sciences in these groups.
So there's a term called Hermes Trismegistus.
Mm-hmm. The record keeper?
Yeah, the 3 times Hermes, thrice Hermes. And that's understood as raising him to...
Harry Potter reference?
No.
Where you're going with it?
No. Oh. You could explain it better, but he's in a lot of Egyptian literature.
Oh,
He's like the record keeper.
Hermes.
Okay. Kabbalah tracks back to this guy. The audience might not know who that is.
Yeah. So if you follow anything to do with Rosicrucian and secret societies, Hermes and Hermeticism is a very popular term. So Hermes with the Trismegistus is a conflation or a merging of 3 individuals into a mythos.
What's a mythos?
It's a mythology that is with you for every generation. It continues. And so in this mythos, you have either 1 before the flood or 2 before the flood, or 1 before the flood and 2 after the flood. And so typically it's probably better understood as 2 before the flood and 1 after the flood. But
these are individuals.
Yeah, these are individuals. 1 is a fallen angel or raised to be a fallen angel. And the other one would be Enoch, son of Cain. Yeah, so Enoch is equated with Mercury and Hermes and other names of similar fashions in the polytheist world. And then there's 1 after the flood, typically from a secret society and out of the Polychronicon of the ancient Masons versus Freemasonry. Freemasonry has these legends in history that they keep out of the Polychronicon and in the histories of Freemasonry. Hermes, as he's called in there, is called Harmine, who finds the 7 pillars of Lamech and or Enoch from before the flood that has all of the knowledge and the religion.
So for Jake, I'm going to catch him up real fast. Is that okay? There were these things written on tablets that were preserved before the flood so that people could find it after the flood. The person after the flood found these.
Harmine.
And then Solomon ends up finding a duplicate or something.
And then he takes that knowledge to Nimrod at Babel. Now, what's interesting about these 2 pillars, to sort of lend some sort of additional important information on fire and water, destruction, which was about to happen, and the flood comes to prevent the fire destruction, is these two pillars. One is designed to survive a flood and float, and the other one is designed to survive a fire apocalypse,
So
because they don't know which one's coming. Yeah. And so Hermes finds this, and he takes this knowledge back to Nimrod. And so when we look at Hermes after the flood, that's one of them. There's also another one further down road who's a priest in Egypt that is developing alchemy to a whole new level. So it's emerging, but there's two different versions of it in polytheism. That's why I name all of it. So when we look at Enoch as being a significant figure in polytheism, represented by Mercury and Hermes, and understood as the same, then we start to get some connections. So the main patriarchs of Freemasonry in the history, or ancient masonry as it would be known then, they are Cain, Enoch, Lamech, Tubal-Cain, Jubal, and Nama, right? And so Enoch becomes the highest elevated one as this knowledge figure. Now, in Egypt, you have, and in Greece and other pantheons, Mercury and Thoth in this case, this is a god who comes about, who is made into a god because of his knowledge. And in the third book of Enoch, which is totally polytheist and probably a document and a writing based on the writings of Enoch the Evil, and understand that both would have wrote scripture from two different religious perspectives, and why they hide behind Enoch, the ecclesiastical one, that is, I like to call him, to get some coverage on that. This individual, Enoch, in third Enoch, is named Metatron. Now, Metatron is one of those names, if you're talking to people in the tech industry that are receiving knowledge from spiritual guides, his name is Metatron. So again, whether it's true or not, or it's just naming these demonic individuals after somebody out of their prehistory, we don't know. But the understanding that Thoth in that pantheon of the Egyptian pantheon could be Enoch is really nails the concept of the relationship of the common religion that was around the world. So Gnosticism is the religion of secret societies. And Gnosticism is a religion that has been trying since its creation, and it's been around since the time of Jesus. So Simon the Magus is a Gnostic from Alexandria. And it's a religion that tries to collect all of the original religions back to its home, to bring the home religion back as the dominant religion. So what we have to sort of understand is when we get into the various polytheist religions, A, they're the same religion, but B, they are the religion of the secret societies. And Gnosticism, as it comes forward, Zoroastrian is the basis for Gnosticism. Zoroastrianism is the Indo-Aryan religion immediately after the flood. There's 5 groups of Indo-Aryans. These are giant groups. And Zoroastrianism is this antediluvian knowledge, Enochian mysticism. So we get it from the giants and we get it from Babel as it crosses the flood. This is the same religion of the Aryans that settled both in Persia to produce the Achaemenid dynasty of the beast kings of the Persian Empire and the Indus Valley. You have gotten same names of the gods in each of those regions because they're coming from that same religion that the people of Babel are going to migrate into and live amongst and intermarry with after Babel, because Babel happens 101 years after the flood. So you have this period of time before they migrate amongst those groups. So now, if we understand Zoroastrianism and all the other religions with sort of the historical connection back to Enochian mysticism, this is the religion of the secret societies, the religion that the secret societies created, that's more recent, called Theosophy, that was designed to be the religion that would unite science and religion for the end time age. And out of theosophy, in conjunction with 1947, Roswell and the alien introduction, comes the New Age. And now if we understand that the New Age has a lot of Eastern religion aspects to it, and we understand that that's the Zoroastrian religion begat in the Indus Valley, we have a connection that comes full circle as the same religion, and why they just have sort of different sort of terms for the Christ consciousness or the divine essence or the Brahman or the Atma that's in the Indian subcontinent of Indian sacred texts.
Okay, so let me put some that this is insane, but have you read Antiquities of the Jews
By
Josephus?
no.
So
Josephus.
Sorry.
Yes.
White. I'm an American.
Oh, that's okay.
You can't tell.
Yeah, I quote him extensively in
Canadians
both
are
books.
educated, and Americans just figure out our own words for it. There's a point in that where Abraham is teaching the Egyptians better than they understand it.
Yeah.
Is this because when you look linearly or chronologically, you have Enoch the good and Enoch the evil, and there are threads that are similar because they're teaching similar things, but one is superior. So Abraham would have come in trained on some of this stuff?
Well, one would think that Abraham, and Josephus, it's interesting that he has those accounts because those are the same accounts that the polytheists have as well. Noah would have been fully educated in whatever was being passed on and used for good. And so whatever was passed on to Abraham would have been a good application of knowledge. Knowledge is neither good or evil.
Yeah.
It's how it's used.
Right.
And we should keep that in mind. And so what the polytheists do, they like to draft patriarchs into their belief system to create this global religion. So they draft all the patriarchs. So they're saying in their version that Abraham is doing the form of polytheism that they started after.
They want to be
flood.
like he's doing the same thing.
Yeah. So again, they kind of get some cover with that. Plus, they can sort of deceive people to say, "Hey, this is the true belief system." And so I think that Abraham did have knowledge, and he would have had, the Holy Spirit operating in him as well for his protection and everything else. And I think he was portraying pure knowledge, pure good knowledge. But let us not confuse that with the corrupted sciences of polytheism. So an example of what is corruption: astronomy is one of the 7 sciences which they use to pervert into astrology, that they use as part of the ritual worship, that our fates are held by the stars, which are fallen angels.
Got it. Is alchemy included in that too?
Yes, alchemy is an extension of the 7 sciences into a different level. So philosophy is something else that people need to understand. It's the theology of the seven sacred sciences. And they hide it in plain sight. We just don't know it. Philosophy means the love of Sophia, or the love of wisdom. And who is Sophia? She is the goddess of wisdom, the main mother goddess of the 12 archons of Gnosticism. That includes the God of the Bible in their belief system, and Satan.
Which is why even in the New Testament, the apostles are just like, ask God for wisdom. Just ask him if you want wisdom, rather than trying to go out and worship it, figure it out on your own. Like,
so the wisdom of the world in the New Testament goes back to the Greek word Sophia.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay. Any questions? You want to keep going?
Let's keep going.
How did the giants survive the flood? If they're after the flood, but they would have drowned, how are there giants after the flood?
It's a very, very good question. I wish we had a verse like Genesis 6:4 after the flood. But the truth is we do not. What we do know is giants are before the flood, according to Genesis 6:1-4. And we know giants show up after the flood. So the word Nephil, singular for Nephilim, is only used 3 times in the Bible. Once in Genesis 6:4, 2 times in Numbers 13:33, where it says the Anakim are the children of giants. It says that twice, but that's in the embellished part of the report. Not saying that Anakim were not giants. I'm just saying they're not Nephilim. And how do we know that? Because when you go to Deuteronomy 2, where it talks about some of the main giants after the flood, whether it's the Horim or the Avim or the Kajulhim or the Anakim or the Emim or the Zamzuzim, you have the Anakim being called giants, and all those other tribes are called giants. That's not Nephilim. That's the Hebrew word Rapha, meaning in male plural, Raphaim, meaning a giant or a tribe of giants. And that word is used 25 times in the Old Testament in Hebrew, all after the flood. So I don't think the Bible is in contradiction. I think Nephilim is in the embellished part of the report to scare the Israelites not to fight these giants, and that it's not only testifying to the veracity of the giants before the flood, but that they're likely bigger, tougher, meaner, stronger. But again, not to say that they're not giants, because we know the size of some of these giants biblically.
It's pretty big
In the Bible.
But they're not as big as the Nephilim.
But not as big as, So the biggest giant that we have with a dimension in the Bible is 6 cubits and a span for Goliath. And he's king of Gath. Ashish is the king that's going to replace him. Josephus says to use the 21-inch measurement for the giants as royales. And that would make him 11 feet 3 inches tall. And he was stout. So Og's bed is 9 cubits and 4 cubits, 9 cubits long. King of Edrei and Ashtaroth. He's also classified as the last of the giants, Rephaim, and that his bed would be 16 feet long, 7 feet wide, made of steel because it wouldn't hold his weight, and that would put him somewhere between 5 or 6 feet wide to fit in, and it would make him somewhere 12 to 15 feet tall. And a 2-to-1 height to width ratio, which is why you have stout as a term used to describe the giants after the flood. Gilgamesh is king of Uruk, not biblical, but in Ugaritic accounts, Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, all the same dimension. He is 11 cubits tall, 19 feet, as the king of Uruk, and he is 7 cubits wide, 7 feet tall. So he's not quite the same dimension. He's actually taller, and he's a dark-haired giant, which is something distinctive from the red hair and the blonde-haired giants, which are typically the ones that we see in the covenant land after the flood and before the flood. Different rabbit hole, though. And so when we look at Og, getting back to the story, he's the king of Edrei and Ashtaroth, and he is the last of the Rephaim. Now, is that from a survival, or is that from the first generation after? I lean more towards a second incursion than survival, because I think it fits better, but we don't have that smoking gun verse, but we have all of these verses of these giants after floods and names that don't show up in the table of nations. Like when we get Rephaim as a tribe in Genesis 14, literally as a tribe in the Mount Hermon region, where the 4 kings of giants who are coming from the east are going to battle with the giants in the middle, in the Covenant Land region. They are a tribe, and they're also a tribe that's listed in the Mighty Seven in Genesis 15, in the land from the Nile to the Euphrates, from Mount Hermon to the Red Sea again. And you also have the Cadm. I will list them a little bit differently, and I will use an I am plural in book 2, as I didn't want to get there in book 1. In book 2, I use I am as a male plural for giant races. I am in the ancient world was represented not only a plural, but a majestic dynastic bloodline. And so when you have Nephilim, you have Rephaim, you have Anakim. So you have the Cadmonim in Genesis 15, you have the Kenim, and you have the Kenazim, or the Kenites, the Kenizzites, and the Cadmonites, as it would be listed in the KJV. These do not have patriarchs in the Table of Nations. Rapha does not have a patriarch.
Why not?
Because he's a giant. There are no giants listed in the Table of Nations. And how do we know that other than that sort of circumstantial information? The parent in the book of Joshua, or the patriarch in the book of Joshua for the Anakim, is a fellow named Arba. He is not in the Table of Nations. Now, in the Table of Nations, we have 70 patriarchs, which isn't an accurate statement, but we have 70 nations that are going to come from peoples that are listed there. There are 9 patriarchless tribes in the Table of Nations. And so in Genesis 10, we get the Canaanites. Patriarch starts the Canaanites. We get son Sidon creates Sidonians. We get Heth creating Hittites. And then we get 9 patriarchless Canaanite families, which is a Hebrew word that basically means family, yes, but more clearly understood, or the other meanings would be a different kind, a different species, those types of words. And that's because they have a Rephaim patriarch. That's why they're not listed there.
Which could even mean that's why the people of Israel were surprised when there were giants in Canaan.
Yeah.
Like they didn't expect it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they should have expected that. I think the Canaanites expected them to be there, which is why they moved there, because it wasn't part of the land that was given to Ham.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So the Hebrew word for Amorite is singular, and all these names are singular, not as you would do for a plural, normally for a people. And so it's Amorite. And it's very much associated with a god in the Baalim Council. We don't get this god named in the Bible, but in the Ugaritic text with Baal and other ones that we would have, and Anat that are listed in the Bible, is Amur. And A-M-U-R, A-M-U-R-R, and different suffixes that are used throughout the Middle East, they produce giants as well. And his servant or his offspring in there is Amuru. And so Amur is the name that I think is passed on eponymously to the patriarch Emor, that's transliterated as Emory for Amorite, as we would understand Amorite in the English being very similar to the name of Amor, and take off the ite and you basically have the same word. And I track all of that in book 2 for people if they want to get into the minutia of this. Believe me, I go deeper. But just to show that we know that these giants show up after the flood. So that's why I lean more towards second incursion, because it just makes sense of the details of the questions that we don't know about. And Genesis 36 is an addition to the Table of Nations to help us make sense of the Horim and the dukes of Seir that Esau and Edom and Eliphaz are going to intermarry with. And in fact, Timnah is a daughter of Seir, which is a pure-blood Horim giant, to create the Amalekites, which are different than the Amalekim in Genesis 14, because you have a couple hundred years and several generations in between them. And again, I do not believe the Bible is in contradiction.
Right.
So how do they survive the flood? That's another possibility, because we don't have that verse.
Yeah.
But you have to do a little bit of legalese to get there. And so one way you can get there is in Genesis 6 and Genesis 7, it says that God is going to destroy everything he created. He did not create the giants. The fallen angels did with the descendants of the Canaanites. And so you can imagine if you wanted to use that as legal terms for justification for the Bible not being in contradiction, that would imply that the fallen angels would have to help them. So in polytheist accounts, they build arks, as in the Epic of Gilgamesh, or Deucalion and Pyrrha, they call the Greek Noah. Deucalion is the son of Prometheus. This is a giant story, so that ark is provided for him as well. or in the earth, off the earth, in another dimension, somehow with
They
fallen
preserved
angelic support.
Yeah.
And another way that's proposed is through the wives, through the genes. That's my least favorite option. Survival would be my second. Second incursion fits for me best biblically.
Yeah.
But I leave a crack open because we don't get that event. I can tell you how you can get there with Genesis 4 language, because they do it again. It could mean again before the flood and in like manner, or again in like manner after the flood. But again, we don't have that verse after the flood. So with the genes of giants, or corrupted part of the corrupted race as the wives through those genes, but then you get into a DNA conundrum in terms of the 4 races and giant genes, and then how does that sort of play out after the flood? And it's very complex. And that giants show up very quickly after the flood. They're known, as you take those names, as the aboriginals back in the Hebrew definition, that the people of Abel go in and marry with. They're already there, so they show up early after the flood. So they either have to survive,
Right.
in my opinion, or they're recreated. And when we get into the language of Jude 1:6 and 2 Peter, where they're talking about this filthy language and the strange flesh is talking about, in its Greek definition, as being a different species again. And so this is talking about the Sodom story. And so when we look at Sodom and Gomorrah, we want to maybe look at that in a more expanded way, and that the kings of the covenant land were Rephaim-type kings, and they were ruling over the Pentapolis of the 5 cities of Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities of the plain. And so they knew the religion of the giants created by the Baalim, whom the Canaanites also worshipped in Sodom and Gomorrah. And they would have understood that if there was a second incursion, that the Rephaim, who received their name from one of the multiple names Baal has, including Raphael, and then you get an eponymously named tribe of giants after Rapha, coming down with that, is they would have understood being ruled over by giants, being of the same religion that would be celebrating, and they do fertility rituals in the Ugaritic text to bring back Baal and Anat and the Baalim, because they disappear mysteriously. They're in the pit prison for doing the same crimes as the parent gods after the flood, my speculation, to create more giants. So now when the 2 angels go in bodily form, they're recognized as angels, whereas Abraham didn't recognize them at first as angels, but they recognize them as angels come to judge them, and they're wanting to have sex with them. So they know angels have a changeling capability. So were they wanting to have same sex, or were they wanting them to change bodies, or did they want to offer some of their daughters to those male angels to create giants? And I'm not saying the Sodom crimes weren't there as we understand it biblically as a sin, but there was more than just that going on. And Sodom is understood as the shining city. It was the city of light. It was on a hill. It was of great knowledge. And the allegory we understand for Camelot and Washington as the shining city on a hill today. These terms stay with us. So this may perhaps be the birthplace of giants after the flood. In Gnostic accounts, they look at Gomorrah before the flood as the first incursion, and then the second incursion
No way.
is at Sodom.
Wow. Okay, we have to fly you back across the world soon to talk about. I'm just going to go through a list of things I didn't get to. Modern day descendants of Nephilim, implications for end time, historical roles and present roles of secret societies, Antichrist lineage, and then like 9 or 10 other things. So we have a nice second episode if you are having fun.
We are having fun, and we can do a second episode today.
Oh well, I have to go. I have to go to a meeting.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. Well,
Right
are you
now?
here until tomorrow?
Yeah, I don't fly out till tomorrow afternoon.
This afternoon.
Yeah.
Let's do a second one this afternoon.
Yeah.
For this episode, can you help me out with something?
Yes.
Can we land the plane on like what do the people of God need to know or do? Like what are the implications? Because there's not all of us are gonna be able to do what you have done. So what are the implications of like if somebody's watching this and they're spiritual but they're not into Jesus, or if somebody's watching this and they're freaked out completely, they're like about to build a bunker in their backyard. What do we need to do? What do we need to pray? What do we do with this so that we can sleep, you know?
Well, I find knowing helps me sleep than not knowing. Some people may
You're a
find that.
contrarian.
I'm a contrarian. But we need to understand that this organizational structure crossed the flood. That this organizational structure rules us today. They are the visible ones doing the work for the invisible ones, for the council of the gods, and the royales are the bloodlines of the giants. And that word royale means kings of God in their belief system. Roy being French for king, going back to Rex and regal in Latin, back to reg in Indo-Aryan language of the giants. And AL is a transliteration of EL, just as IL is in different languages. Just as we see Baal, also in the secret societies, they would define that as Lord God. So again, counterfeiting, overlaying things, that's what they do.
Yep.
And so these are kings of God. In book 1, I use the Latin term, Rex Deus, kings of God, that they call themselves. They believe and they keep their genealogies back to a specific Nephilim and or Rephaim patriarch, and back to a specific, what I call tongue-in-cheek, a celestial mafia godfather.
Okay.
Or a fallen angel,
Yep.
or an Nephilim.
Yeah.
And they have the genealogies to prove it. And it's how pure those bloodlines are, or how ennobled they are by grafting in through scions other ennobled bloodlines from another
Nephilim trace.
another Nephilim patriarch or celestial mafia godfather. They enhance that. And between the nobility and purity is where they fit in that overall culture. And so when you see their coat of arms, those are taciturn symbols of their genealogies.
Got it.
And it was a standard that goes back into ancient times. So when they went into another realm, they would know who they were and where they fit.
Which is where occult symbolism comes from. And
Yeah.
so we'll talk about that in the second episode.
So they run the world today. And we live in their world. Everything, we are awash. We are in the Gentile sea. Just as the beast empires come out of the Gentile sea. And that we need to understand that we live and breathe it, and they do everything in plain sight because they don't believe we're smart enough to understand. But once we understand their language and how they do things, then we can see what's going on. We can decode all of their literature, all of their language, all of the buildings, everything. We can understand that we're living in a perpetual polytheist ritual. We just don't know it, and we can start to separate ourselves. Secondly, we can start to prepare ourselves for what is to come. Because if we are in the fig tree generation, and I think we are, I think we're still in the times of the sorrows. I don't think we should get ahead of biblical chronology of events that have been set down. So we want to be careful with that. If we are in the fig tree generation, then we can't imagine yet what's coming at us. And it will be completely unimaginable, and we will be totally unprepared. And the risk of that, and people say, well, I have faith. You've never been tested like what's coming. We need to understand this. We need to be serious about this. And they can prove to us over and over and over how they can seed wedges into our faith by asking us one question we can't answer. Because they know the Bible better than we do. So put on the armor of God. Get into the Bible and learn. Get curious so that we can start to prepare. And so much so that even the elect will be deceived, if that were possible. And Jesus specifically warned that it was possible and it's coming. So if we don't want to be deceived, because again, it is going to be things we can't imagine, from propaganda to things we will physically see, it's going to change everybody's preconceived conclusion, and your faith is going to be tested. So you better know why you believe what you believe and start to get ready, because it's going to be like the days of Noah, both before and after the flood, when the fallen angels walked amongst us, when the giants walked amongst us, when the world became close to being destroyed by fire.
I have something that I would just love to touch on as we.
I have 5 minutes.
Okay.
Just for the record.
Just to wrap things up, to give people more of a lens for what you're saying, is something that stuck with me throughout the episodes. You mentioned that the motive of the fallen angels, Nephilim, giants, all of that, they're trying to withhold humans from their destiny. Could you speak on what that destiny is? And,
Pause.
Yes.
Sorry.
Too much?
I don't think he's going to be able to answer that.
Okay.
And give me to the meeting.
Gotcha.
I gotta be on.
I did earlier when I mentioned being raised up to be like angels as
Right.
inheritance of
Right.
eternity. That's the destiny.
Right.
Okay, but we could underline that.
Raised up like angels.
To be like angels and to
Let's-
judge. Yeah.
Let's start the second episode with that,
Let's go. Let's do it.
so we can do that. Okay. Sorry, I have a meeting I've got to hop on.
That's okay.
And then we're gonna feed you, and then come back. I'm gonna put my brain together so that you can break it again, and then we'll just do all of it in one day. Thank you for this. This was incredible. Thank you.
I appreciate that. So, as you can see, I have a lot of fun with it, and it's
Man.
not that I'm not serious about it, but
It's so good. We'll put your books.
So cool.
We'll put both books
Yeah.
in the show notes. I think if people are serious about being prepared, like what you're talking about, then it's a low cost way to just download 35 years of work on
Yeah.
your end. So thank you for doing that work and putting it together.
you're
for
quite
us.
welcome.
All right. Thank you guys. See you next time.